Thanks, Mark. I don't think I've ever been introduced as a squirrel, but that's a first. But a good one, I like it. Okay, I'll tell you a bit more about myself first before we get into it, because you're probably wondering how I ended up here. So my grandfather, he was sailing 1920s, 1930s on these big passenger ships. And at those days, you had plenty port time, so there were 2, 3, 4 weeks in port in the US, in Africa. And my grandfather, he was sailing, and he had all these great stories for me when I was a kid. And he used to give me the world map, and I could point on any country, and he had these amazing stories for me. Some of them for sure were made up, but at least it sparked my interest for shipping and traveling, and I always associated it with traveling the world. So I wanted to actually go sail myself, but my eyesight wasn't good enough at that point. And those weren't the days where you could just have your eyes lasered, so I couldn't. And I studied naval architecture, which I thought was the next best thing then. And it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because I get seasick like there's no tomorrow, I can tell you, so I don't think I would have lasted a week on board. But I did study naval architecture, and then I worked as a surveyor for a few years. In Germany at that time, they had a very strict differentiation between naval architects and marine engineers, and naval architects were confined to ballast tanks. So all I got to do was do structural calculations and then inspect one ballast tank after the other. And 3 years into ballast tanks, I got a little bit bored. I asked them if I could please do something else and maybe start with a boiler or something. I mean, overall, I did have a marine engineering degree as well. But they said, no, you can only identify as naval architect or as marine engineer. And you're clearly a naval architect. So I left and I went to Belgium and I started working for Euronav. That's a ship owner. They had, or still have, oil tankers, crude oil tankers. And I started working as a superintendent, looking after the ships. I was closely cooperating with the captain, the chief engineer, helping them with their maintenance, having the budget for the spare parts, making sure they had everything they needed, overseeing dry docks, picking up new buildings from the yards. Euronav then moved their technical management to Greece, and so I was offered to move along with them, but I didn't want to. So I moved on to Exmar, which was the gas tanker company in the same building, same family. They took me over. At that time also I did my executive MBA, because I thought, okay, I need a little bit more than just engineering, and I needed to understand more about finance and start understanding more of the business. So I did that, and then I became fleet manager. I changed companies again. I went to Vroon, which was quite interesting. So I joined them. That's a Dutch owner. They had about 200 ships, half offshore, half deep sea. And they were in dire straits, so they were in deep financial trouble. And I was hired with an idea to help turn around the company. To a certain extent, we managed, not as much as we should have, but company is still around today, but in a much smaller shape than it was before. And then in 2019, I went to Stolt Tankers as a fleet director. Mark was my boss. And then I took over as managing director in 2022. And here I am today. And I was passing by and I asked Mark if he was here for a coffee. And he said, why don't you come and I make you work? And here I am today. And Mark asked me to talk a bit about our new building program. Before we go into that, a few words about Stolt. So we own around 506 chemical parcel tankers, and we operate a pool of 170. It's all parcel tankers, meaning that if you look at your typical oil tanker or mid-range tanker, they have one cargo. We have many tanks, many different parcels, many different cargoes at the same time. We do operate worldwide and regionally. We also have barges, and most of our tankers are stainless steel. We do have some coated tanks, but most of what we have is stainless, and that means we can take more specialized cargoes. We also have a fleet that is getting older, so every now and then you need some new ships. So we just signed for 12 new buildings, and Mark asked me to talk about new buildings, so I thought, okay, talking about it is boring, I'll make you work now. So you all get to be my new building department. And I tell you, as the managing director, we need 12 new ships. So how would you go about it? What's the first thing you would do, or what would you want to know? Yeah?
Emission requirements.
Emission requirements?
Mission requirements.
Mission requirements, okay. Yeah. What else? Yeah?
How big are these ships?
How big, exactly. Yeah?
Present, future regulations.
Regulations, yes. Mm-hmm.
What are we going to be carrying?
What are we?
Cargo.
Cargo, okay. Yeah. Budget. Okay, how much are we going to pay for these ships? How much are we willing to pay? Okay, you need more information. I tell you, on average, these ships are making, at the size we're building, $18,000 a day. We have, how many years do we keep them? 25, yeah, okay. Operational cost a day, give or take 8,000. So how much are we willing to pay? Who has a calculator? 18,000 a day minus operational costs of 8,000 a day, 25 years. Okay, anyone has a number for me? Yeah?
500 million.
That's, yeah? 91? 18? 1-8? 91? Okay, this is what the ships will, if everything we earn goes into shipbuilding and into buying the ship. So we probably want to make a little bit of a profit. Yeah?
25 to 30 million?
25 to 30? Okay, I wish you were right. It's more in the range of 70, give or take. You got it? Yeah. So,
Not the right reason.
okay. 91, yes, this is if, and we don't know, of course, how the future will look like. Right now, we have a very good year with the Panama Canal more or less closed because it's dry, with the Red Sea closed because the Houthis are shooting at ships. So that takes out supply side, and demand is still there. So we're having a really good year right now. But the bad years will be coming back, so yeah, let's be on the conservative side. And also money costs money, right? So if we want to borrow money from the bank, we also have to pay interest, and you want to make a little bit of a profit. So I think 70 is fair. Okay, so we have, let's see, what do we have? We know now how big our ship will be. We know what cargo we're going to transport. We know how much we're going to pay, or we want to pay. What else do we need to know? Yeah?
Deadline?
The deadline? Yeah, yeah, okay. Delivery dates, yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Who's gonna build it?
Who's going to build it? Good one. Yard selection. We'll get to that in a minute. What else? Yeah.
Routes.
Routes? Yeah, okay. So we want to know the range. How long can the ship go without having to bunker in between? So what's the range? And is there any special requirements? If you want to go to, for instance, polar waters, you need, which we don't do, but you would need a different specification. If you're in warm waters all the time, again, you could restrict it to warm waters only. If you want worldwide, you want worldwide. Anything else? Yeah?
Classification.
Classification, okay. Yeah?
Type of fuel.
Type of fuel. How do we select our fuel? What should we select?
It's usually based on money or based on how you meet emissions requirements.
Money and emission requirements? Okay. So what should we do? What engine do we put in our new buildings? Yeah?
Future fuel ready,
Future fuel ready. Why that?
because we don't know what's gonna happen.
We don't know what's going to happen. Okay. I'll give you a bit more information on that. This is how it looks like now on the fuel landscape. So we have our current fuel oil as a reference fuel. And what you see here is LNG, methanol, ammonia, biofuel, and hydrogen. You see volume. That means for ammonia, for instance, you need 3.6 times as much volume as compared to our regular fuel today. You see TTW and WTW. Any idea what this is? Tank to wake and well to wake. So that's the emissions of the fuel. Tank to wake is only looking at the ship. So how many emissions do we have out of the funnel? And well to wake takes into account the production cycle of the fuel. So how much more are we emitting or less just looking at the fuel? So, what do we choose? Yeah? Biofuel? Okay, biofuel is the only fuel right now that is available and that you can use with the existing engines, but doesn't really help you for the future. Yeah?
Do you have an idea of the cost for each fuel?
No. We don't. We don't. What other questions would you have to take a decision? Yeah?
Safety of the fuel?
Safety? Okay. Let's see. LNG is available, and it's a gas, and it's usually used on gas tankers with people who know about gas. Methanol is pretty safe, with the exception that if it burns, it has an invisible flame. So if you go to YouTube and see videos of methanol fires and you see people dancing for unknown reasons next to their car and jumping around, there's could be a methanol fire. Ammonia, very toxic, to a point that people will immediately die if they get in too much. And hydrogen, well, pretty explosive, but not really available yet. So what do we take? Yeah.
There's no right answer, but we can design the ship to carry one fuel right now and leave room to change over later in its lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So like LNG methanol, perhaps.
Why would you choose methanol?
Well, the availability and the range seems kind of spotty, but I mean, I know there's not as many methanol ships today, but ideally in the future there'll be a lot more, so there'll be a lot more readily available.
Okay.
And if the margin for emissions is a lot better there, then you can make a changeover.
Mm-hmm. Other opinions? Yeah.
Methanol is that liquid you don't have to have a cryogenic system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so remember our 70 million? Okay, so if we go for readiness, somebody said it here, so meaning you have the availability to convert at a later stage. So for methanol, we would be good with the 70 million. If you wanted LNG or ammonia, we can add 10 million. Hydrogen, not available, no technology that is available today. The first methanol engines are coming out now, 2025, 26. Ammonia engines, the first engine has been just now on the test bed, so there's still a lot of time until we have the technology available. But also from the safety perspective, on the regulatory side, the framework is not ready, and that is just being developed as we speak. So there's quite a big risk to it, because again, we're stuck with our ship for 25 years, right? So we have to take a decision that we can live with that ship for 25 years, and we don't want to take a wrong decision here, because that will be really costly. Also, fuel availability is a big question mark. So with our chemical parcel tankers, we operate worldwide, and we go wherever the cargo is, so we don't have a liner service up and down between two ports. So we don't know where we need the fuel in the future. And in order for these well-to-wake numbers to kick in, we actually need green fuel, and that means it has to be produced with renewable energy. And there was a study last year that said, okay, what if we wanted to go green with the fuel for the whole fleet worldwide, as it is today? We would need how much % of the worldwide renewable energy? What do you think? 50 to 60, spot on, 53. So we're responsible for 2 to 3% of the worldwide emissions. And if we wanted to turn green tomorrow for the whole fleet on green ammonia, for instance, we would need 53% of today's renewable energy. If you were using that energy to feed it directly into the grid to exit coal and gas, we'd be down by 20%. So the question is, what is going to happen in that space? And will we have access to this renewable energy? Should we have access? No? Because yes, we're helping our sector, but from a holistic perspective, we're not really helping the planet here. So it's very uncertain what is going to happen in that space, and we'll see what the future brings. So what we've done as a company is we said we want to have methanol-ready engines, meaning if and when it turns out to be the right decision, we can convert them for an additional cost to burn methanol. Good. I'll show you the spec of very high level. How do we know how many tanks we need? How will we go about that? Yeah?
You know the demand that's for each ship, and what they are expected to carry.
Well, the way we work is so we have contract cargoes. So for instance, a Chevron will tell us, we want you to carry X amount of that chemical from A to B over the year, and you'll figure out how you do it and with what ship you do it. And then the empty space we can fill up with spot cargo, so we go out on the market through a broker or people contact us directly, and they ask us, do you have space to carry my cargo from A to B? So it's, to a certain extent, it's up to us, but then of course there is a market there. But you're in the good direction. So if I showed you today's layout, what we have on the existing ships, you would see many more smaller tanks. So these are much bigger now, or not much bigger, but on the bigger end and we've eliminated the smaller ones. Because what we see over time is that the demand for these smaller parcels is slowly diminishing, and there's also a trend to use more tank containers for these smaller parcel sizes. So when you talk to our commercial department, they will tell you that parcel sizes are increasing and it's better to have bigger tanks. Good. Somebody mentioned yard selection. So how do we select a shipyard? Yes?
Ask for bids.
Ask.
See who can give you a good price.
How do we do this?
Set out a proposal of what the design would look like to a bunch of shipyards that you want to work with, and then see what they come back with on cost estimation.
Okay. Do we find them on Google or? Yeah. So we might work with a broker actually, so who has connections. Okay. Send the spec to the broker. What else do we do? Yeah?
Look at the yard's reputation. Look at the yard's reputation.
Reputation?
If they're offering the best price doesn't mean they're going to make the best quality ship.
Quality, okay.
Yeah.
So how do we go about quality? What's different for a chemical parcel tanker? What does the yard need to be able to do? Yeah?
They should be able to produce a tank that won't rust and that will last a long time. You need a high quality.
High quality steel? Okay, yeah.
You can approach the yards that have built the ships that you have in your fleet already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Find a yard that's willing to build with stainless steel and the type of ship that you actually want.
uh-huh. So what's so special with stainless steel? Yeah?
It's very hard to weld.
Very hard to weld, yes. And also, if you think about it, so we have chemicals in there, and ideally you don't want them to mix if you have a crack. So for us, cracks and welding defects are much, much more sensitive than if you look at your average bulk carrier, because who cares if there's a pinhole? For us, it's a big issue. So yes, hard to weld, and we need really high quality on the welding seams. We also have corrugated bulkheads, and these corrugations are a pain to make. So good. So we need a yard that has stainless steel experience. We want a decent price. We want good reputation. What else do we need? Yeah,
A delivery date from when they can get it done.
delivery date, yes.
Good payment terms.
Payment terms, yes. Yeah,
Like a warranty or something if something goes wrong.
warranty, yeah. Good. So from a payment terms perspective, there's also financial risk to it. So if you look at chemical tankers, we have 3 countries that actually can build stainless steel, and that is Turkey, China, and Japan. So Turkey, I don't know how many of you follow macroeconomics, but Turkey has really, really bad inflation. And right now, no bank in the world is willing to finance a ship built in Turkey with a 70% inflation and the risk that comes with it. So if that yard goes bankrupt, you lost your money. So nobody is willing to take that risk. And that leaves us with China and Japan. Now, Japan has 2 issues. One is they're not really willing to build anything that is 2024. They like to mass produce what they've done in the past because that's easy for them. So they gave us designs from 30 years ago and say, okay, why don't you take this? And we said, yeah, but we want something that is a bit more energy efficient, please, because even if we don't know what future fuel we will take, we still want the most efficient ship that we can have these days. And they said, sorry, not interested. Because they can have much less headache and build a oil tanker or a bulk carrier or a container ship. And then you don't have all this headache with the stainless steel. And the other issue we have in Japan is also that the Japanese currency right now is actually very favorable to us, which is great because it's cheap, but there's a huge risk to it for them because they get their materials from outside the country, so it's much more expensive to them. So also we would have to hedge from our side, and that would make the project immediately 8 to 10 million more expensive. And then we're looking at 80 million. Well, we're getting very close with our margins there. Huh? We still want to make money. So that leaves us with China. And then we have found 2 Chinese yards. One is called Wuhu, the other one is called Nantong Jiangyu. And we have placed orders with both yards for 6 ships. Why 2 yards? Yeah? Yeah, indeed. Yards also sometimes give you options, meaning you say you want 6 plus 6 ships, or plus 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus whatever, meaning you sign for a number of ships now, and then you can declare your options at a later time. That used to be done in the past quite a bit and was very, very useful. But that only makes sense if you really have new information by the time you actually declare the option. So these days, the yards are not really interested, and basically you would have to declare the option already a month after signing. And that doesn't do anything for us because we don't have any new information within a month. If we had a year time to declare the options, well, maybe we would have known more on the future fuel situation, but the option time was just not enough, so we decided not to take any options and just to hedge it over 2 yards. Yeah. How much negotiation power do you think we have with the yards? Who's in the better position? The yards, yeah. I don't know if you have talked about Porter, if you have an economics class. Anyone seen this concept before? Okay, so this is a bit of an industry analysis from the perspective of the shipyard. So in the middle you have how it works for them with their direct competition. Threat of new entry, threat of substitutes, bargaining power of suppliers, so that is their suppliers, and bargaining power of customers. So they're doing quite well on the threat of new entry or substitutes. If you want to build a ship, you still need to build a ship. So they're in a happy space there. But then you see already the bargaining power of suppliers. So a steel supplier, stainless steel supplier, there's not too many in the world. So they can basically set the prices. There's very few specialized equipment suppliers when it comes to main engines, when it comes to cargo equipment for chemical tankers. And also they're bound by exchange rates, so there's not a lot of negotiation power for the yard to really bring the price down. So they basically have to take what they get from their suppliers. When you look at their competitors, so in Asia you have very high yard capacity. You have many, many shipyards. And they like to mass produce whatever is easy, whatever they have in the drawer. And they like to build 12 of them in a row, or 20 ideally, and not have a headache with stainless steel. But also you will find a lot of difference in expertise. Some can do, some cannot do. You will find difference in capacity. Some can build several ships at the same time, others can only do 1 ship. Terms and conditions, payment terms, whatever, you will find big differences. And delivery time, slot availability, again, depends on how busy they are. But nobody likes to work with stainless steel, so we really have to take what we can get. And as you said it already, the yard is in a much better negotiation position than we are. So whatever we ask for extra is a big fight. So the discussions we had with China, yes, we could talk about methanol readiness. We did ask for shore power readiness, again, because in our space there's no regulatory framework yet, there's no infrastructure, we don't know exactly how it will look like. We did ask for a couple of other extras, but everything you ask for is really, really difficult in terms of getting it done. Good. So if you think about the process of building a ship, then, so now we have our specification, we have our broker, we possibly have a shipyard. What else do we need? How do we go about it? So we have we've contracted a designer to help us with the outline spec, so we know how big, how many tanks, how fast, which fuel. So they help us to make the drawing. We give that to a broker. Broker goes out, finds some shipyards. We find one we like. What else do we need? Yeah. A lawyer, indeed, because we need somebody to help us review the contract and the terms and conditions. And that is actually also done by the new building department together with our legal department. And it's pages, I don't know how many, a lot. And it's really going through each and every line to make sure that everything is safe in terms of warranty and whatever you need. Yeah.
A bank?
A bank, indeed. We need finance. What else? Yeah? Inspection? Not yet, but they come later. Well, unless you mean a yard inspection, yes, we want to do due diligence with the yard. So then we send somebody, or we do it ourselves, to go inspect, see their facilities, see if they can really do stainless steel. When have they done stainless steel the last time? Do they have enough people with the right certificates? Yes. Anything else? Insurance we also need, yeah. Yeah.
A coffee break.
A coffee break. No, so we need insurance. Okay. So then it comes to actually contract signing. So we hope we find a yard, we sign, and then we get into the stage of between the contract signing and before we start building, actually. So what happens next? Yeah.
This is when the yard starts procurement?
Yeah, so in the pre-contract phase already, we agree together on a makers list. So the yard will actually give us a list with several choices of makers that we agree on. And then in that next phase, we would then take a pick. So for instance, for main engine, you would have maybe Wärtsilä and MAN on it, maybe 2 Chinese alternatives. And then in that contractual period, then it's our time to say, okay, now we want this engine and this pump maker and this valve supplier. And then they can start buying, yes? Yeah?
Detailed design.
Detailed design, indeed. So there's a lot of technical discussion up and down. So they will give us drawings, detailed drawings. We will have to review, which is a lot of work. So also our crew helps quite a bit, because when it comes to looking at piping drawings, electrical drawings, it really takes a lot of experience to visualize what you see on a drawing and then to see if that makes sense. Do you need an additional valve? Or is this connection okay? What else do you need? Yeah, indeed, drawing approval. Yeah. We would also get our site team ready then, because the moment we start building and steel cutting, you want to have a team on site in the shipyard that then helps you with all the inspections and supervises the shipyard, indeed. Good, and then we go into actually building the ship. So then you have your stages, probably talked about it. So we start with steel cutting, keel laying, launching. You have factory acceptance tests for all the equipment, key trials, sea trials. So our site team would attend all these inspections to make sure that everything is up to standard and that we can live with that. And then we come into pre-delivery. So then it would be for us to send some more crew on site. We would deliver owner-supplied items. So sometimes the shipyard says, okay, I'm not going to purchase this, you have to do this yourself. Or we say we want to do this ourselves because we get a better price. Also, a lot of outfitting will be done through us, probably, if you think about everything from galley equipment to bed linen to whatever. We might decide that we want to do this ourselves because we want a certain quality. And then we would look at training requirements for the crew, because if we have new engines on board, they probably also need to learn how to operate them. If there's new fuel or if there's any other new equipment. And we would get into delivery protocols, naming ceremony, and finally delivery. And then we end up with having a ship and finally being able to sail. Usually around 2.5 to 3 years after contract signing. So we signed last year in December. We'll have the first year on the water end of 26 as per contract. We yet have to see this. I think it will be more early 27, but who knows. And then these yards, they can push out a ship every 2 to 3 months. No? Questions? Remarks? Anything surprising as you had expected it, or? Yeah?
Can you talk to how you would come to a decision on which flag state to put your ship in with?
Flag state, okay. So we work with a number of flag states, which in our case is Liberia, Cayman, Madeira, and UK. So flag state, there may be a couple of factors leading to that decision. So the banks might have an opinion. So if you have a mortgage, they might require you to have, for instance, a European flag. Or if you're co-investing with another joint venture partner, they might have different ideas. But then it's basically down to our existing flags because we know how to work with them. And basically it's around selecting a flag you're comfortable with. So for us, the big decision is always European or not European. European flag has much tighter requirements when it comes to equipment. Doesn't mean it's necessarily safer, but it's more expensive. They also have stricter requirements when it comes to recycling, which at the beginning of the life isn't really relevant yet, but will have a big impact later on. So on the other hand, the other flags are easier to work with. Again, doesn't mean less safe. So we tend to go to Liberia because simply we work with them for a long time. For chemical tankers, there's also more to it because you want to be sure that they really know about chemical tankers. Sometimes something happens on board, you need a dispensation, you need help from them. So you want them to actually know what they're talking about, so you don't want a small flag state that now starts thinking about what is actually happening. But you want quick and fast help, so you want them to be big enough. You want them to work with you in a partnership approach, and also somebody who is big enough to have an opinion towards the IMO. And then in Europe you have many, many differences that the countries still have their own ideas about how a ship should be constructed, and it doesn't always make sense. But for instance, Belgium wants 2 emergency exits from the engine room, which you don't always have. So if you want to change flags then from Liberia to Belgium, you might be required to suddenly build a second emergency exit, which is big from a structural perspective. So every, especially European country, they have their little specifics, and then the shipyards don't like that too much. Also sometimes then the European flags, they want their own inspector on site during the new building process, which just costs you a lot of money but doesn't necessarily add value because you have classification there to do that job for them. So it's really more of a somewhere between politics and personal preference of what experience you have as a company also to set up the company structure in that country. So for instance, Malta requires you, if you wanted Maltese flag, you have to have an office representation really in that country. So then you have to set up a person there with a post box. Just overcomplicates things, doesn't really add a lot of value. Yeah.
What
So we have a mix of DNV and Lloyd's. And for new building, it's actually the shipyard that has the contract with classification. So they get to select the yard, but we get to have an opinion. So they get to select the classification society. So we told them we would like either DNV or Lloyd's because it's in line with our portfolio. And so both yards have chosen Lloyd's. Yeah.
How do you decide how much your capacity is to be spot contracts versus long-term contracts?
That's really business decision. It's gauging how the market is doing. Are the rates going up? Are they going down? And then you decide if you want to go long on your contracts. So do you want 2 or 3 year contracts, or do you want to keep them short? And then, for instance, now we're on a ratio of about 50-50, which is very low for us. In the past, we had much higher contract ratio. But because we could see that the markets were picking up and the rates were actually going up, we decided we want to have more capacity for the spot market and not so much bound by contracts that were signed while the market was still low but going up. So you have more room for spot. So it's really a trading decision. It's feeling the market and then hoping that your guess is right. Okay? Yeah.
Are there ships like low-speed diesel kind of ships, or are they, diesel electric, or?
Yeah, so we do still have some diesel electric ships in the fleet, which was a decision from the past. Mark can tell you all about it, I think, but that was mainly, my understanding is to have more cargo space because you need smaller engine rooms then. They do consume more fuel. They're less fuel efficient. We were actually considering to go back to diesel electric for a moment because of the whole future fuel situation, although they consume more now, but it's much easier to change these engines, so you could actually change them out in 5 years from now, or 10 years, whenever you know what's going to happen, and be more flexible. But we decided against it because the consumption is so much worse. So we're on slow speed, 2-stroke engines. Yeah.
At the end of the ship's design life,
Mm-hmm.
do you typically find you're going to be refitting, selling, or scrapping? Just curious.
So a lot comes down to customer acceptance. So especially if you're in the tanker space, there is a bit of an idea ships shouldn't be older than 20 or 25 or whatever. Especially in Europe, there's lots of big customers who want ships that are younger than 20. Now we have the advantage with chemical tankers and with the stainless steel. We don't really have these fatigue issues. We're also long time in port, so we have port stays as high as 40%. And so these ships get to last a lot longer. And so they, in theory, could go until 30 years. And then it comes down to customer acceptance. Do we find somebody who's willing to take them beyond 2025? And some do. So we do have ships that are now going until 30. We're extending one ship to 32 now. So we'll see how that goes, Cedar. And then the decision is basically, is there somebody who wants to buy the ship? And what will they do with the ship? So the smaller ships, there's often a second life opportunity for them as a bunker barge. So there's lots and lots of companies who really like them because of the stainless steel tanks. And they just use them, as bunker barges. That's great if that works. Or we recycle. And you also have to be really, really careful because the regulations around recycling are super strict. So we have to, I don't know if you talked about the Hong Kong Convention or the Basel requirements or EU ship recycling regulations. But you have to be really, really super careful where you recycle and that you do it in an environmentally safe situation. So we just can't sell to someone and let them recycle it in a second-tier shipyard and not take care of what's going to happen to the ship. So we really have to know what the buying party is going to do with that ship. And sometimes it's just safer to recycle it yourself because you don't want to end up in trouble by some shady buyer who then dumps it in Bangladesh on the beach and then it's our name on the side. So we can't have that. Yeah.
What countries does Stolt usually pick to recycle?
So we do work with a yard in India, and we've been working with that yard for a long time, so we're auditing them on a regular basis, and they were always above the regulatory requirements, and they're actually in line with the European requirements, which is the strictest you can get. They won't get the certification because Europe only certifies European yards for now, but they are on the same standard, so that's, yeah. Yeah.
How do you narrow down the optimum dead weight capacity for each ship? Because you could have a larger fleet of smaller ships or a smaller fleet of larger ships.
Yeah. So with 106 ships that we own or 170 ships in the fleet, what you want ideally is interchangeability. So you want to have 3-4 classes of ships where you can use the same size in the same trade. So you want something which is highly interchangeable. So in this case, we asked our commercial department, and they said, okay, we want something 38,000 tons dead weight. Initially, they asked for 33,000 tons, but then when we looked into it, we saw that we could get more value for our money in the 38,000 range. And also from an environmental perspective, they're much, much better because they're just more efficient. Yeah.
Would you typically take a currency hedge even if the risk is seen as low?
Very much depends on how that currency is tied, if it's pegged to the dollar or not. But that's then for our financial guys to figure out what they want. Yeah.
So this morning we had a very bad accident in Baltimore. Everyone undoubtedly heard of that one. More likely than not, the ship appeared to have a blackout because of approaching a bridge.
Yeah.
So it raises the question of redundancy and how one can perhaps design in more redundancy for various systems on the ship. How would you approach that problem? And how much would you spend for it? How do you value it?
Good one. And I think probably the easiest solution is to use tugs. And I'm quite sure we will see a requirement coming up that if ships pass dangerous landmarks, bridges with pillars in the way, that there will be a requirement to have 1 or 2 tugs around that can quickly react. When you talk about redundancy, then we're starting to talk about DP, dynamic positioning. So if you look into DP2, DP3 ships, they really have redundancy. DP3, they will have really 2 separate engine rooms so that you can immediately switch over. But that also costs you a lot of money. And when we're back to our 70 million, what we're, give or take, willing to pay and what we're able to earn with the ship, I don't think there's a economic solution to redundancy. But maybe you'll prove me wrong. Maybe I read about it in 10 years and you'll design something. But yeah. Good. Well, if there's no more questions, then thank you very much.